There's no doubt in my mind that New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave deserves his contract extension.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we might have seen the final home game for two New Orleans Saints legend and a potential legend in the making. Wide receiver Chris Olave is proving that he deserves his contract extension. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for helping us get here as we bring you your team every day. New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave, there's no doubt in my mind, is earning every bit of the potential contract extension that he's looking for to stay here in New Orleans with the New Orleans Saints. Let me break it all down for you. This is a young man that is entering his fifth-year option after this year. He's coming out of the final year of his rookie contract in terms of the standard 4 years, going into that fifth-year option, which has already been picked up, and has been very transparent about the fact that there's been open communication about a contract extension. He doesn't know where it's going to go yet, but that there is clearly mutual interest in getting a deal done to keep Chris Olave in New Orleans. Now, what the financials of that look like are a whole different conversation, but less important right now, more important right now, that he's earning potentially his opportunity here. And we're seeing it here in the 2025 NFL season. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Jimmy Graham, Marcus Colston, Joe Horn. 5 names, 5 pass catchers that have been with the New Orleans Saints within recent decades. But that's not the only thing that they have in common. Those 5 pass catchers are also the only New Orleans Saints in the team's history, which extends back to 1967, with at least 90 receptions and 1,000 receiving yards in a single season. Now, some of those players, Jimmy Graham, Michael Thomas, did that multiple times. I think Michael Thomas did that 5 times in his career, which is pretty incredible. But that is the rarefied air with which Chris Olave has put himself in conversation. And so we look at that and we can say, okay, it's clear that Chris Olave has been one of the best pass catchers and offensive weapons that the Saints have had already in its franchise's history. It's up there, especially when it comes to receiving wise over the course of maybe those 5 players now, right? So then we go beyond that. He now only needs 8 receptions and 2 touchdowns to do something that no New Orleans Saints player has ever done before in the team's history. And that is become the first player in the team's history with 100 receptions, over 1,000 receiving yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns in a single season. You think about all those times that Michael Thomas piled up in terms of receptions and receiving yards, never had a double-digit touchdown season. Remember, that was one of the big metrics that we were looking at for Chris Olave coming into this year in terms of how do we know Chris Olave is taking steps forward? How do we know Kellen Moore is getting the most and the best out of Chris Olave? Well, a 10-plus touchdown season was one of our sort of easy barometers that we could point to and say, yeah, it's working. And Chris Olave is now 2 touchdowns away from that after scoring his career high touchdowns last week or yesterday against the New York Jets, his 7th, and then later on his 8th touchdown to extend that career best. He also only needs 80 receiving yards to top his career best receiving yards for a season, which was previously 1,123 in his second season here in New Orleans in 2023. So if he gets 80 receiving yards, he's at 1,124, and he now has his career high in that category. Now, when it comes down to achieving all of these things, there are two opponents left, the Tennessee Titans on the road, as well as the Atlanta Falcons on the road. The Tennessee Titans currently have the number 21 passing defense in terms of passing yards allowed. The Atlanta Falcons have the number 8 passing defense in terms of passing yards allowed. So Chris Olave's best bet might be to get, 8 receptions, 80 receiving yards, and 2 touchdown receptions against the Tennessee Titans. And that's not far-fetched. He just had 10 for 148 and 2 touchdowns against the Jets because he's playing a part in an offense right now that doesn't have Devon Vele, that doesn't have Rashid Shaheed, that doesn't have Brandon Cooks. So your attacking in the passing game, or your passing attack, is effectively Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson, and then a bunch of guys that are helping to fill in and all that, and doing so admirably. But for Chris Olave, he's the focus of this passing offense for the rest of the season. 2 games left. He could make history for the New Orleans Saints. All he needs is 8 catches and 2 touchdowns. It'd be great for him to get those 80 receiving yards as well to set his career high, but in terms of the franchise annuals, that's where he has the ability to have an impact. Now, I'm speaking a lot about Chris Olave deserving his extension because of what he's doing relative to New Orleans Saints history, which I do think carries weight. But beyond that, he's also making waves across the NFL, right? Or ranked up against the rest of the NFL. Right now, he ranks top 10 in several receiving, major receiving metrics, including receiving yards, where he's currently number 8 with 1,044. Receptions, where he's currently number 6 with 92. Receiving touchdowns, where he's currently tied for number 8 with 8 touchdown catches. And then he's also seen some of the largest volume, meaning that he's an absolute dominator when it comes to dominator rankings of target share and all those things. Number 3, tied for number 3 in the NFL right now with 145 targets. He has been the go-to player for the New Orleans Saints in their passing game. And I understood the question marks about Chris Olave coming into this season from an injury perspective, dealing with all those concussions and everything like that. That was a scary part of the year for him. That was a scary part of his career. And that's something that you still have to look at when it comes to Chris Olave. But the conversation about him being a wide receiver that wasn't good enough is where I consistently drew the line. Clearly he is one of the best route runners in the NFL. I don't know if you saw his route tree or his route distribution from Sunday against the Jets, but there's not a single place where he didn't line up and run a route from. And it didn't matter where he was lining up. He ran inside breaking routes, outside breaking routes. He ran deep balls. He did everything. And that was just on the 16 targets, let alone what he actually, just the routes he ran. So you add in all that, and you add in a clear desire for Chris Olave to be here in New Orleans, meaning that from his side, he'll be willing to work it out in terms of making sure that New Orleans can extend him and keep him around, but then keep the assets necessary to build around that offense and build around quarterback Tyler Shough. I asked him straight up Sunday afternoon after the game, do you want an extension? Do you want to be here in New Orleans? And he quickly answered yes. This is a big part of what we highlighted in yesterday's episode, that players want to be a part of what the Saints are doing and the program that's being built by head coach Kellen. And Chris Olave is a perfect example of that. Said that a big reason why he wants to stick around here in New Orleans is because of the fact that the organization from the top to the bottom believed in him. That they didn't give up on him when he was going through ups and downs, dealing with the concussions, when he was contemplating retirement at 24 years old. That's where Chris Olave was last year. And now look at him. Top 10 in the NFL in receiving yards and on the verge of being a franchise first for the franchise that has continuously bought back into him. I've watched Chris Olave several times limp off the field, leave the field, and sit on the sideline and be tended to and all this other stuff, and then force his way back out on the football field. In fact, the touchdown that he caught from Taysom Hill, he wasn't even supposed to be on the field for that play. It had nothing to do with injury. He just wasn't in the package. And he said, nope, I want to be a part of this. He knew what was going on. They were trying to get Taysom Hill a touchdown. He wanted to be a part of it. And what happened? He catches a touchdown right over the middle. Rest is history. And there's still history left to be made by Chris Olave, who 100% is earning his potential contract extension this season. All right, coming up next, the New Orleans Saints have a couple of already made legends, as far as I'm concerned, for their franchise. And we might have watched their last game in the Superdome. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the only sportsbook you're catching Ross Jackson using. The sportsbook where you can get in on all of the action across the world of sports, and even after games begin, because of their outstanding live betting features, one of my favorite features over at FanDuel. Games ongoing, don't worry about that. The money line, the spread, it's all updating instantly. Player props are moving as well as players begin to heat up or cool down in certain situations. It's what I love about FanDuel. And you can even get in on things like end of year awards as well. How about Tyler Shough leaping from number 5 at plus 1,600 odds up to number 2 at plus 390 odds to win Offensive Rookie of the Year? Imagine if he closes out the final 2 games with a win or 2 wins, what that could potentially do for him. Maybe something to go and put a little bit of Skrilla on while you got it. Go and check them out today over at FanDuel.com, the easiest way to keep up and be in all the action across the rest of the NFL season, especially with their live betting. You can find it all today over at FanDuel.com, where the game moves fast, and so can you. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at Car Gurus. It's 2025. Buying a car should not be a chore. If you're ready to go out there and pick up your new ride, that should be an exciting feeling. You shouldn't have to be bogged down with upsells and no, what about this model? Or we have a more updated blah, blah, blah. Go and get what you want over at cargurus.com and pass up all of the complications that are so unnecessary. Over at Car Gurus, you can filter down to everything that you're looking for, all the way down from make, model, things like that, to trim and more features as well. You'll be able to find exactly what it is that you are looking for, and you're going to be able to get a hold of a transparent and hassle-free buying process with over 4 million listings, the most by any online automotive marketplace. You'll always find the best deal. So buy or sell your car today at cargurus.com. That's CARGURUS.com, cargurus.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Continuing on with this bonus episode of Locked On Saints. I'm thinking of making a habit of this. Let me know what you think as we move ahead here, especially through the offseason, where there's going to be so much to discuss every single day. Prospect breakdowns, free agency, so much to look at once the season is over. But the season's not over yet. And that's important, because with 2 road games left, we might have already seen the final home games for a couple of what I would call, be mad at me if you want to, Saints legends already. I know that they're not done playing yet, so maybe calling them legends might be derogatory, but I think these guys have already etched themselves into legendary status. Of course, we're talking about defensive end Cam Jordan, as well as quarterback, tight end, running back, everything. Yes, his position is yes. Taysom Hill. There's a chance we saw their final home games. And if you saw their post-game pressers, I think that it became very evident very quickly that they are realistic about that possibility as well. Cam Jordan had something like 40 different people at the game. They were all holding kind of big head, sign type things, hand signs of all of his different headshots throughout his career, faces throughout his career, which of course have become like an NFL-wide bit over the course of his career. He gets 2 sacks in the game, makes $800,000 on back-to-back plays. Not a bad payday. Not a bad way to walk into the Christmas season there. And becomes, grabs sole ownership of number 17 on the NFL's all-time list with 130 sacks in his career, passing former Saints defensive lineman, actually, edge rusher, Ricky Jackson. And of course, already owns, having passed Ricky Jackson some time ago, the franchise sack record as well. This is the first time that Cam Jordan's going into an offseason without a year on his contract. He's never gone into the offseason without guaranteed money for the next year. And so there's no telling exactly what it is that's going to happen here. But you can see the reality with which these players are approaching the situation. Cam Jordan's had his family around big time for the game. Taysom Hill had a bunch of his family members there for the game in a game where he surpassed that incredible 1,000 yards rushing, receiving, and passing in a career. First player in the Super Bowl era to ever do that within a career. There were only 3 guys that did it before that. All of them did it before 1955. So before the NFL was the NFL that we know today. And then some, if you really think about it. And they were all there. To see Taysom Hill catch that pass that got him over 1,000 receiving yards. To see Taysom Hill throw that touchdown to Chris Olave over the middle of the field after having his receiving touchdown wiped away with a penalty. Them finding a way to continue to go back to him. And Taysom even himself was like, man, I was like surprised by that, right? Kellen Moore continued to go back to him. And the awareness of Kellen Moore to know that that would mean something to Taysom Hill, that would mean something to the organization, that would mean something to Saints fans in attendance and beyond, inside and outside of the Caesars Superdome that day. And what we watched could have been their final home game. We don't know for sure. We don't know for sure. They could both be back next season. And honestly, if the money makes sense and the contracts make sense, I don't think that that's a terrible idea. I mean, Cam Jordan, 8.5 sacks on the season, becomes only the 9th player in NFL history to have 9 such seasons of 8.5 or more. He could potentially get himself another $600,000 with another half sack, needs 9 or more to recoup all of that money that he shifted over to incentives. And once he crosses 9 sacks, the list of players that have 9 or more sacks for as many seasons as Cam Jordan is even shorter than the 9-person list at 8.5 for 9 seasons. And so he could continue to push himself into rarefied air with what is going to be a future Hall of Fame career. The question is, does the future Hall of Fame career finish in New Orleans this year? Does it finish in New Orleans after next year? Honestly, if he comes back on a deal that makes sense for both sides, whether it's incentive heavy or whether it's simply just like a fair contract that's above veteran minimum, but that's not bank breaking for New Orleans, who are trying to wrangle in that salary cap, right? They can make the sentimental moves, but they need to make the sentimental moves with a lick of realism attached to it. And if the Saints do that, I think it makes perfect sense to bring Cam Jordan back for another year while you continue to build out that edge rusher room and while you continue to build out Brandon Staley's defense. Great to have a leader like Cam Jordan around that's going to hold guys accountable, that's going to show players what good habits look like in terms of preparation, all those other pieces. And of course, selfishly, very fun to talk to. Would love to be able to work with him for another year. Just selfishly, I don't mind saying that. I like my job. Meanwhile, Taysom Hill could make sense to bring back. I think if I'm being entirely honest, if you ask me, hey, Ross, which of these guys has the potential to be 80% of what they were this year, next year, that 80% coming from an edge rusher is probably more, not substantial, but I guess, I don't know the right word that I'm looking for here, but it's more reliable, maybe more trustworthy. Those aren't the right words that I'm looking for, but that would probably be more likely to happen for an edge rusher than it would be for somebody that moves all around the offense and contributes on special teams and all those other things. You know what I mean? And so because of that, I think the contract that makes sense for Cam Jordan isn't the same as the contract that makes sense for Taysom Hill. But would you love to have Taysom Hill in the black and gold for an extra year and let him be able to actually have a training camp to get involved and let Kellen Moore kind of figure out what it is that he could do with that unique talent, even if it's sparingly throughout the season? Yeah, I could see an argument for that. But in any case, none of that's guaranteed. And while I can see an argument for it, it's not my decision to make. It's not the player's decision to make. It's the organization's decision to make. And make no mistake about it, I'm not advocating one way or another. The decision has to come from what makes sense for both sides of the equation. So because of that, it's very possible that we might have seen the last home game for those players. And if so, at least their last exposure for New Orleans Saints fans was an incredibly positive one, a win 2 sacks for Cam Jordan, a great game, touchdown, receiving yards, rushing yards, all of it, the typical all-around Taysom Hill, fake punt. I mean, all of it was there for these guys. And I think that was awesome because that would be a very appropriate send-off in front of in front of the home fans, at least, if that was truly indeed their final home game as New Orleans Saints. We'll see where things go as they enter the offseason. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, we'll dive in by the numbers. We'll take a look at Tyler Shough's Rookie of the Year campaign, which is absolutely being built, how the Saints defense is setting itself apart, particularly over the course of the past few weeks, and all the numbers that you need to know from the Saints win over the Jets. We got all that for you on tomorrow's episode. Make sure you come through. We appreciate you very much. As always, make this a party day part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, about how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.